Richard's laughter echoed through the silent courtroom, sharp and mocking, as he scribbled his signature across the divorce documents. He tapped the pen on the wooden desk like a drummer celebrating a victory. His smile wasn't just a smile. It was a weapon, meant to humiliate. Across from him, Camilla sat stiffly, her fingers clenched together, her eyes fixed on the papers before her. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the entire courtroom could hear it. She had imagined this moment 100 times, her marriage ending, the man she once trusted now laughing at her pain, but imagining it had never been as cruel as the reality. Richard leaned closer, his voice dripping with venom. "Guess this is the end of your fairy tale, huh? You'll walk out of here with nothing, Camilla." "Nothing but your pride." The words stung, but Camilla refused to look up. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Still, her silence only made Richard laugh harder, his arrogant grin widening as though he had already won the battle. At the far end of the room, the judge watched quietly from the bench, his expression unreadable. He shuffled a few papers, his eyes flickering between the estranged couple. The gavel rested within his reach, but he didn't need it. The tension itself commanded silence. The entire courtroom felt heavy, as though everyone inside knew something more was about to unfold. Before we go deeper into this shocking courtroom drama, tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this? I'd love to know where our amazing viewers are tuning in from. And if you love powerful stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what happens next. Camilla sat motionless, her chest tightening with every laugh Richard let out. She could still remember when his laughter had once been warm, when it had made her feel safe. But now it was the cruel sound of a man who believed he had stripped her of everything, her love, her dignity, and her future. She bit the inside of her lip, fighting back tears. She would not cry, not here. Not in front of him. Richard finally dropped the pen onto the table and leaned back in his chair with exaggerated satisfaction. "There," he said, flashing that same arrogant grin at the judge. "It's done." But the judge did not immediately respond. He adjusted his glasses, picked up the folder beside him, and studied the contents for a moment longer than expected. His calm demeanor made Richard shift slightly in his seat, though his smirk never fully faded. Camilla noticed it, the way the judge's eyes lingered on a sealed envelope tucked between the papers. A shiver ran down her spine. She knew that envelope. She had seen one like it before, months earlier, when her father's lawyer had told her there were documents that would only be revealed at the right time. "Could this be it?" Richard, oblivious, stretched out his arms and whispered mockingly, "Poor Camilla. Alone again. No husband, no father, no money. What will you do now?" Her father. Just the mention of him made her heart ache. Samuel had been her anchor, her strength, and his death had left a wound no laughter could heal. But Samuel had also been a man who never trusted Richard. He had seen through the charm, the smiles, the smooth words, and maybe, just maybe, Samuel had left something behind, something Richard would never see coming. As Richard leaned back with victory still dancing in his eyes, the judge finally cleared his throat. He lifted the sealed envelope from the file and said words that made Camilla's breath catch in her throat. "Before we finalize this divorce, there is one more document that must be read aloud." Richard's grin faltered. Camilla's heart raced. The courtroom fell into utter silence. Camilla's eyes drifted to the envelope in the judge's hand, and in that instant her mind slipped backward, back to days when life had felt simpler, safer. She remembered being a little girl, running through the wide green lawns of her father's estate. Samuel Carter was no ordinary man. He had built his business from nothing, brick by brick, deal by deal, always with honesty and grit. To Camilla, he wasn't just a father. He was a mentor, a protector, a living example of dignity. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Cammy," Samuel would tell her, his deep voice steady. "Life will test you, but dignity and perseverance will always carry you through." Those words were etched into her heart. They came back to her now, clear as if he stood beside her. She also remembered the day she first introduced Richard to her father. Samuel had shaken his hand politely, but his eyes, those sharp, discerning eyes, had narrowed ever so slightly. Later that night, Samuel's warning echoed in their dining room. A man who laughs at another's pain will one day drown in his own. Be careful with this one, Cammy. But she had been young, in love, and desperate to believe Richard's charm. She brushed off her father's words as unnecessary caution. Then came the sudden storm, her father's unexpected passing just months ago. Camilla had barely mourned. Her marriage was already collapsing, demanding every ounce of her energy. The grief she should have faced was buried beneath legal battles, cold silences, and Richard's cruelty. What she didn't know then, what Richard could never suspect, was that Samuel had left behind a final safeguard. A sealed will, a document meant to surface only when the time was right, and that time was now. The courtroom, once filled with Richard's mocking laughter, grew so silent that even the faint hum of the ceiling fan felt loud. The judge placed his spectacles on the bridge of his nose and held up a thick, sealed envelope, its golden wax seal unbroken. This, the judge said gravely, was entrusted to the court by Samuel Carter before his passing. It is his last will and testament. For the first time since the proceedings began, Richard's grin faltered. His pen, still clutched between his fingers, slipped slightly against the paper. He straightened in his chair, trying to mask his unease with a scoff. A will? What does that have to do with this divorce? The judge ignored him, carefully tearing the seal and unfolding the document inside. His voice carried weight as he began to read aloud. I, Samuel Carter, being of sound mind, do declare this my final will. To my beloved daughter, Camilla Carter, I leave my entire estate, all assets, and my controlling shares in Carter Enterprises. However, these inheritances are to be transferred to her only upon the finalization of her divorce from Richard Hale. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Camilla's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had expected to lose everything today, but instead, her father's voice echoed from beyond the grave, shielding her even now. Richard's face drained of color. What? That's absurd, he barked, rising from his seat. This is some trick! But the judge continued, unfazed. Samuel Carter further stated that Richard Hale is to receive nothing, not a share, not a cent, from his estate or business holdings. The courtroom shifted with murmurs. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously, their eyes darting between Richard's crumbling expression and Camilla's stunned silence. Richard stumbled backward, his voice rising in desperation. This isn't fair. That company, those shares, I helped manage. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Order in the court. His eyes narrowed. The will is legal, binding, and witnessed. Samuel Carter foresaw this day. His daughter will not be left vulnerable. Camilla's chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with relief. Her father's wisdom, his foresight, had saved her. The mockery Richard had thrown at her minutes ago was now nothing but ashes, and as Richard's laughter died, replaced by panic, the balance of power in the courtroom shifted forever. Richard's fists slammed against the table, his polished arrogance unraveling into raw desperation. This is ridiculous, he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. You can't do this! That will, it's forged. It has to be. But his words only earned him disapproving stares from the courtroom spectators. The same man who had mocked moments earlier now looked like a cornered animal scrambling to escape his fate. The judge, calm and steady, lowered the will back onto the desk. Mr. Hale, your outburst changes nothing. Samuel Carter was precise in his instructions. The inheritance is tied to this divorce. And now that you've signed, the conditions have been met. Camilla's chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. For the first time in years, she felt a surge of strength she thought she had lost. The chains Richard had wrapped around her, manipulation, humiliation, control, were breaking. One by one, her father's words echoed in her heart. A man who laughs at others' pain will one day drown in his own. Richard staggered forward, his eyes wild. Camilla, you can't let this happen. We were partners. I supported you. I gave you everything. Finally, she lifted her gaze to meet his. Her voice was calm, almost chilling in its steadiness. "You didn't give me everything, Richard. You took everything. My trust, my peace, even my pride. But my father, he gave me back what you tried to destroy," the courtroom murmured with quiet approval. Reporters scribbled faster, sensing the headline of the year. Richard's desperation turned into fury. "I won't accept this. I'll appeal, I'll fight." The judge's gavel came down with a decisive crack. Enough. The court recognizes Samuel Carter's will as valid and binding. The divorce is finalized. Camilla Carter is now the sole heir of her father's estate and controlling shares in Carter Enterprises. Richard Hale has no claim. The word struck like a hammer. Richard collapsed into his chair, his face pale, his arrogance shattered. Camilla, on the other hand, straightened in her seat. For the first time since entering that courtroom, she no longer felt like a victim. She was her father's daughter, dignified, resilient, unbroken. Richard's laughter had ended. The tables had turned, and Camilla had won. The moment Camilla stepped outside the courthouse doors, flashes from cameras lit up the gray afternoon sky. Reporters swarmed, microphones extended, voices overlapping with urgent questions. "Miss Carter, how do you feel about the verdict? Did you expect your father's will to change everything? What's next for you now that you control Carter Enterprises?" Camilla paused, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But instead of bitterness, her face carried calm resolve. She spoke clearly, her voice strong enough to rise above the chaos. "My father taught me that dignity and perseverance will always outlast cruelty. Today isn't about revenge, it's about justice. And it's about honoring his legacy." The crowd leaned closer, their pens flying across notepads. Camilla continued, her words measured and graceful. "I will use what my father left me not for personal gain, but to expand the charitable foundations he cared so deeply about. Education, housing, and opportunities for those who have none. That is where his wealth will live on." Behind the crowd, Richard stood alone, shoulders hunched, his once polished image in ruins. No cameras turned his way now. No one cared for the man who had laughed at another's pain. He had lost everything, his wealth, his reputation, and the woman he believed he could break. Camilla, sensing his presence, did not look back. Instead, she whispered softly to herself, as if answering her father's voice carried on the wind. "Dignity is the armor of the just, and no laughter can take it away." With those words, she lifted her head high and walked away. Not as a woman defeated, but as one renewed. The legacy of Samuel Carter lived on through her, and Camilla became a symbol of grace and power that no courtroom could ever contain. If you found this story powerful, let us know in the comments. What lesson did you take away from Camilla's journey? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more inspiring stories like this one.